Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. Today's date, it is December 13th of 2021. When this tornado or tornadoes hit, uh, I made an hour video on tornadoes and on a tornado that hit in uh, Ruskin Heights in the Kansas City, Missouri area. It came in to made a video on that. And then I always, I think, include too much stuff. I talked about uh, working at a hospital and having a tornado on the ground heading towards that hospital. What else? Anyway, like I said, I put too much, I think, uh, into it. I think I should make the video shorter. Let's start with the Ruskin Heights, Kansas City uh, tornado. And I was in high school at that time. Uh, it was in it was on May 19th of 1957. So I would have been in, let's see, 55, 56. I think I'd have been a uh, junior, I believe, in high school. Anyway, a tornado cut a 71-mile path through major businesses and neighborhoods of Ruskin Heights. It was a F5 uh, tornado. Um, my mother was a licensed practical nurse, and she responded to Ruskin Heights to help out. She was there all night. I guess I never asked her what she did there. Um, the news reporting on it, one of the big things that uh, was talked about a lot was that I think about that time, I think Kansas City probably had I'm guessing, three VHF TV stations and I think one UHF TV station. And uh, a lot of people decided to, when the tornado hit, decided to drive out and see what everything looked like. And the police and the fire and everybody who needed to respond to it had a extremely difficult time, you know, getting to the scene. And there was a lot of complaints about, and there was, things on the TV and radio and everything, stay at home, do not go out, do not clog up the roads. Um, let's see here. It says here that in the 1970s, 60s, and 1950s, the suburb of Ruskin Heights experienced a record in home ownership and general population. Uh, People were moving into Ruskin Heights at record speed. It says here Ruskin Heights managed to rebuild in about 10 years. A total of 3,106 homes were made during the Ruskin boom of the 1960s and 50s. Ever since, the rate and amount of houses being built has significantly stagnated. Uh, Years later, well, a number of things. After this tornado hit, the television stations, whenever there was a tornado, warning or a possibility or whatever, the TV stations went to, weather reporting. And they would stay off for a long time. And a lot of people were, pissed by that. But people also were really afraid of, after the Ruskin Heights tornado, uh, years later, it went about, let's see, 1972, 71, 70, about 1969, I believe. My wife and I, we had had a tropical fish business for 4 years. Uh, on Blue Ridge Boulevard, very close to the Ruskin Heights area. And in fact, we lived in Ruskin Heights uh, after that. After that time, we lived in Ruskin Heights for a couple years, I think. Uh, Also, we started up a private patrol service, and which was basically me. I had a couple of times I had somebody to help, but it was just my ex-wife handling the radio communications at home, and me signing up accounts and patrolling at night. I kept the area very small because I'd worked for a company for about a year, and they had like patrol officers. And their patrol officers, because, well, take me as an example. Uh, when I hired in there, they put me at a uh, art institute, uh, guarding the place where they had some paintings and stuff set up there. Then after a while, they called me and told me to come out to Overland Park to the thing, and I went out there and they said, okay, you're going to be patrolling Overland Park. And that's Overland Park, I'm guessing, this is a guess, probably 300,000 people or something. Good size, And a big place, and plus the salesman, signed up places like a retirement facility. Must have been more than just because it was, uh, they had a bunch of nurses there coming and going on at shift change time, stuff like that. And so they had me, okay, you need to be here at these places. And then I had to be at, I think the bars closed at 2 in the morning, I believe then the law was. And so I had to be at this place at 2 in the morning and go in and make sure that everybody left and that there was no problem. And uh, it was right near a naval air station, and Marines and people in the Navy hung out there. And the company told me, be sure and take your nightstick in when you go, go there. So anyway, I pulled up outside the place, and I thought, nah, I don't care what the company says. If I go in there with a nightstick, you know, one of those Marines, or maybe more than one of them, they're going to shove that thing up my ass. So I just went in, and when it was 2 o'clock or whatever, the bartender announced, no more drinks, we're closing now, or whatever. And a Marine came over to me, and he says, I'm not going to leave. What do you think's going to happen? And I forget exactly what I said, but it was something to the effect of, well, I got my orders, and I got a job to do, and not going to be good. I'm hoping that are going to going to leave. And then I started out, of course, every time if somebody get out of the chair to go to the restroom or whatever, they'd come back and I'd have their chair turned up. And anyway, the Marine went ahead and left. He uh, no problem. So I never had any problems there. But that was, they just had me. The company had me set up to go these places that were all over. You could set your watch by me. I had to be at certain places at certain times, and I had every car dealer on. I think it was called Metcalf's. Well, no, that was, can't remember now. But it was, the main drag that went through this place, and it was just not the way to do things. So when I quit, I started my own patrol service, and I took a small area, South Kansas City, and I had people outside of that area wanting me to patrol their place and check their place or whatever, and I did. I kept a small area. At night, I could roll the window down, and hear glass breaking or whatever. Now, one of the places I went to sign up uh, was a liquor store at the junction of 435, going in a couple of different directions, and another, coming in there. This was a liquor store, and it was there by itself. Uh, there was a tavern, you know, next to it, and uh, that tavern was owned for years and years, uh, owned by uh, the father of uh, the woman that I married. She was 18 uh, when we got married. I was 26. But anyway, I went into this liquor store that my father-in-law had moved his tavern because they were doing highway work coming through there. And so he moved his tavern further south, actually into that area that I was patrolling, but not because of that. And I'm not a drinker, and a lot of people would be really happy to have their father-in-law own a tavern. But I think I was only in it once or twice. I didn't drink. But anyway, I went into this liquor store, and it was a man and woman working there, employees. And I explained, that I had a patrol service, and I would be, and they said, oh, please, both of them, please, could you come back? I guess I was probably there like at, 8 p.m. or something, I don't know. And they said, could you please come back? The owner of the store will be here at like 1 a.m. in the morning. Could you come back and talk to him, please? We'd really like, for you to be patrolling this place. And I could tell they were frightened. And I said, okay, I'll come back. And I did. I came back and, went in and started to explain to him. He said, no, not interested. I've got an alarm system, you know, and I wish that I had just, I don't think it would have worked. He seemed like he was an asshole. I wish I'd have said, okay, how about this? I'll patrol, your place here for a month for free. And if you don't like the service you're getting, then say that's it. But if you like the service, then please, whatever. And anyway, he said, well, I've got an alarm system here. And I said, uh, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be here every time that you close up, but I'll be coming often, to check, and I'll be here sometimes, when you're closing, if I can make it, And no, no, not interested, He didn't say get out, but it was. So about a week or two later, I think it was about a week, I heard on the news that the two employees that the police department finally, a police officer uh, checked the place. They closed at I think 1 or 2, something like that, and the police officer, I'm not sure if it was the one going off duty or the one coming on duty, but you know, the police officer checked, found the place unlocked, nobody there. And a few hours later, the two people who wanted, the service and who I tried to get it for them, they were found dead. And I really feel bad about that, but because they knew that they were in a really bad area. There was no other businesses around there, and it was the perfect place to, you could have been going 435 towards, well that was in Kansas City, but you could be going 435 to Overland Park, Kansas. You could be going down 71 highway to, it was just a place, and those people knew, they knew it. Um, I saw on the news when they were, showing the place and talking about it. In the back of the building, there was a sticker. Somebody had that, that patrol service or something for that place. The the news media showed that, and I was thinking, well, thank God I didn't have a sticker. Uh, so anyway, for about a year, uh, I had that patrol service in the Ruskin area. In fact, Ruskin apartments, which were wiped out in the storm, Ruskin Shopping Center, and I had all those accounts. What was interesting when there would be, and this is many years later, uh, the uh, the people would come out. I mean, they would come out if the forecast was, uh, you know, for a storm or whatever. The people would come out. They'd be standing at their doors, looking at that. A lot of years later, looking at the sky because it was a bad storm. Um, like I said, then we also lived for a while, for 2 years. We lived in the Ruskin Heights apartment, not apartment, but a home. We bought a home. And the other thing, uh, I started working hospital security then, and that was about 1972. Well, it turned out I worked, uh, 30 years hospital security at different hospitals. But at the first hospital, and I worked there about 3.5 years, I believe it was. One time an ice storm came through Kansas City, and power lines just came down like crazy. Transformers were blowing up, lighting the sky up. I was working the day shift at St. Joseph Hospital, and an ice storm, had come in, and I was walking inside the hospital. I passed the gift shop. There was a nun that worked, because that hospital had like 2 wings, 6 floors. Each one was 6 floors. They kind of joined in anyway. Gonna say. And one wing, 6 floors of it, had for retirement nurses or nuns who were disabled or retired, or, whatever. Then the other 6 floors was, for the public, what have you. Anyway, I was walking down. I passed the gift shop, and I'm not sure if the lights flickered then, or if I just, anyway, there was an old nun in there, and there was one window, not very big, up towards the top, above the curtains or whatever. And I said, "Sister, why don't you open up, those Venetian blinds, Sister, why don't you open that up and let some light in case we lose power or something?" And she was like, "Young man, we have a standby generator that will kick in if that happens." And I said, "Well, Sister, why not just open it up, let a little light in?" "No, we have a..." So I said, "Okay, Sister." I walked 2 or 3 feet down and of course that place was built like marble floors, walls, By the way, if you saw the movie, what was it called? About the nuclear war that happens in that area. I think actually Leavenworth, was it Leavenworth? That building the hospital moved, and the building was tore down, and the movie people came along. Oh wow, debris in in a major city. This is perfect. So they signed up their papers or did whatever they did, but they came back and the hospital had already arranged for some of the material to be moved, the stuff. So they used the video, but they were unhappy that the hospital had left it alone. Anyway, I walked away from the gift shop, and boom, we lost power for the hospital. The standby generator did not kick on for some reason. Now this was during the day shift, and there was plant operations there. And I knew, though, where the generator was, and I knew how to start it. I started that direction, but the plant ops got it going. It was, I don't know, a little bit, it was really dark in the hospital, but the plant ops got it going. And so then, for one thing, you had people show up, and I think they were looking for, hey, the hospital was maybe looking some advantage that they could, come. But Anyway, I think the standby generator ran for about 15 minutes, and then uh, the fire alarm went off. It seems that the plant operation, of course, they had a check-off section. I don't know how they often did it. Once a month, they ran the standby generator for 15 minutes, you know. Uh, but the standby generator was inside the hospital, but right above it was a uh, fire alarm. And the plant operations people didn't pay any attention to that, and they also had never run the uh, standby generator for any longer than 15 minutes, and it set off a fire alarm. And so, the fire department had shown up, and then I had like a fireman coming up to me saying, "You have to turn off the standby generator." I said, "You're talking to the wrong person. You need to talk to plant ops, and you need to talk to administration. Uh, you know, people are depending on the power." And I said, talk to them. So, and then people in food service lit candles, and so we did have a little bit of a fire. Uh, so that was a nice one. So I worked the day shift or whatever, and it was hectic. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and I got home, and the sky was just lit up over and over again with transformers blowing up. The lines got ice on them. They fell down. They came down and it blew up and bang, boom, boom. But we were without electricity for like uh, a day or less. And one of the guys that I worked with at the uh, hospital security, um, he didn't get back his power for like a month because it was that was in Independence, and I'm sure there were other areas where but each house, the power lines had broke, and they had to go, and of course they had, the way they do, they had from other, places, power and light people coming in from all over to get people hooked back up. But it took, in Independence there, it took a month before that guy got his power back. And other people, they had to go house to house. Now back to the tornado. After Ruskin Heights, anytime there was, the danger of a tornado or something, the TV just went, I'm sure the people in Ruskin Heights probably were happy that so many people were paying attention. But finally people got tired of, no television. And the problem then also was that there would have been amateur radio operators, I think, with the Skywarn program. Well, anyway, when I was in high school, uh, I was a member of the Kansas City, Missouri civil defense. We would meet once a month in Kansas City, Missouri City Hall. If we had 20, okay, remember this was during I was in high school, so this is during the Cold War. Uh, I was in the Ground Observer Corps. We watched for for enemy aircraft. Well, we watched for all aircraft. We'd stand a post on. For us, it was on top of the Army Record Center, a military base, and they built us. Uh, we had a pass to show, and then we'd go to the top floor, and then there was a tower that went up, and we climbed up to the thing. And we stood 2 hours, you know, watches, two of us, and we reported all aircraft. I think everybody did. We thought it was kind of, this is Kansas City, Missouri, the heart of America. And I think we all thought, hey, if we're, sure, Canada and, or outside, Canada and areas. But by the time, if we called in, Russian, bomber over Kansas City, it was kind of too late. But anyway, we'd stand to watch. We had a phone up there. They had very simplified the way you did things. If you want to, I think you can do a search for uh, uh, I got my pen someplace that we wore. I can't remember what was it called. Anyway, when we saw an aircraft, or if we heard the aircraft, but if we would dial operator on our phone, and then we would give the information, that we were able to get. And we'd pick up the phone, dial the operator. When an operator answered, we'd say, oh, how could I forget that? Aircraft flash. We would say aircraft flash. And the telephone operators, we took priority over. I'm sure if the President of the United States was talking, they wouldn't cut him off, or if the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of the Air Force or whatever. But we took priority over, and they would connect us immediately, and then we would give the command center or whatever, we'd give the information and they'd plot it. One time, they connected me right away, but they couldn't connect me with the United States tracking location or whatever. I got connected to, I guess it was Quebec, because it was Canada, and the person had a French accent, but I guess it could have been somebody, with a French accent, at some other location. But so anyway, I was in civil defense, and I was in the Ground Observer Corps, and about that date, the Ground Observer Corps was done away with because the United States and Canada, and I'm not sure if there'll be some other, finally had the radar that they needed, and they didn't need people, watching, so that was the end of that. And so we were trained as weather observers. The Weather Bureau came in with one of their key people. I forget his name now. And now he told us that, he says, you're the first trained weather observers. And I find that hard to believe, because that would have been, 58, 59 or something, whenever the Ground Observer Corps was done away with. So they trained us to be weather observers. And, uh, I never, when I was hospital security, that's one of the things we had to, that we had to do that fell under our, and um, what had happened before there was weather observers when the TV station would just go because of Ruskin Heights, they would just be nonstop, and of course there's not very much they could say. Uh, but you would just get, maybe the sky would be clear and whatever, but some police officer who I doubt had any training in, weather or anything, but he had a radio, in his car, and if he saw some cloud up there, he would, you know, call in, and the news media would put it on, the air that a police officer reported seeing a funnel at 119th and Blue Ridge or something rather, and then it would be, you know, and the people got tired of that, and so when we came in, we cut down on a whole bunch of the, so I was, the 30, not the first couple, the 2 or 3 first years working in hospital security because the nuns didn't want, they wanted security because it was the worst, well, the hospital that I worked at, that was the worst area in Kansas City. I can say that because that's where I lived. That's where I grew up living there in that area. That first hospital I worked at, St. Joseph Hospital, was at Linwood and 31st Street, or uh, anyway, it was the worst area. Well, that hospital I worked at, we had 10 security officers who worked there, and you can't hardly cover, you know, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day with 10 security officers. We had to do it because the nuns were not going to, they were, they were going to get money for the diocese, for the bishop's fund, for the, for the Vatican, for the Pope's missionary, whatever. And the nuns just were not going. But then after that, but we had 2 security officers shot there. First, Dan Stadel, shot and permanently disabled. And then exactly a year later, at first security officer was shot at 9:15 p.m. in the Wabash parking lot by 2 guys. The second security officer, John Galegas, at 9:15 p.m. again. A guy came into the parking lot and broke into a car, and then the security officer, John, saw him, and he saw John. They both fired at the same time. They both hit each other at the same time. But John Galegas was dead when he hit the ground. Wouldn't have been dead, by the way, if he'd had a bulletproof vest on, but the nuns wouldn't buy bulletproof vests. And actually, I don't think any hospital security officers at that time had bulletproof vests. I think the police had just got them, I believe. So then when I moved on to the next hospital, and after that, security was one of the duties that we performed. We taught employees how to use fire extinguishers. We actually took the employees out into the parking lot, started little fires. Thank God we didn't burn anything down. But and the weather thing we gave at all the hospitals after that. We would once a year the employees would have to go through watching a video on tornadoes and how to recognize them and what have you. And but this one time at the second hospital I worked at, Trinity Lutheran Hospital, and it was, daytime, and the sky was clear, pretty clear. But on the television or whatever, we didn't have a television in the security office, but as I was making my rounds, they reported, a tornado on the ground. And I forget the first hospital, that it was tornado on the ground, heading, and then it was heading for the next hospital. And I think that would have been Baptist, and I think the next hospital was St. Luke's, and the next hospital was whatever, and it was coming, So, uh, you know, on weekends and at night, there isn't an administrator at in the in charge of the hospital. There might be some hospital, a really major one, that actually might have somebody in management who would be, but for all the hospitals I worked at, it was always a head nurse, and she was designated, and she was in charge. Uh, Now they might have had two to cover, and I guess they worked it out somehow who was, But so anyway, this is heading towards uh, Trinity Lutheran Hospital. So I called up the house supervisor, the nurse, and I said, we need to go into code gray, sister. No, wait, but that was not St. Joe Hospital. Okay. We need to go into code gray. No, she says, no, I don't want to do that. And I said, but there is a tornado at, it came down on a filling station at such and such. It, is heading towards such and such a hospital, heading towards such and such a hospital, heading towards such and such a hospital. At the time, though, I knew the names, I'm 80 now, haven't been doing hospital security for 22 years or something. And I said, no, we really need to go in. It's been reported down on the ground. It's heading this way. Well, no, I don't want to do that because we'd have to page, code gray, I forget how they did it. Beep, 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 code gray, code gray, code gray, beep, beep, beep. And then we'd have to give the all clear, and that would wake up the patients, And I tried a little bit again, and she wouldn't settle for it. The next day in the newspaper, it showed it showed the air, such and such a hospital went into, well, they wouldn't say code gray, but went into their tornado thing. The next hospital went into which next hospital, which would have been, oh, I forget. And so, and then our hospital was next in line. And I'm not sure if they said, Trinity Lutheran Hospital did not. And then right behind us was St. Mary's Hospital. And there was a street, well, we had a big parking lot at that end. And then there was a street, and then there was St. Mary's Hospital. St. Mary's Hospital went into whatever their code gray thing was. And I mean, anyway, I logged it on my activity sheet that I talked to, the house supervisor. Told her we need to go in code gray, and she, refused. So, so later, quite a few years, I'm trying to think of quite a few years later on, I was working, I'd become like the go-to guy to work at the other small hospitals, and we didn't have security around the clock at them, just at night. So, and I'd worked about 10 years at this one small hospital right in the Belton where I lived, which was great, until they yanked me out. Um, Then I was sent to the main hospital for a year, and then they sent me to a small hospital, Lee Summit Hospital. They didn't have security around the clock either. But so I'm working, and it was raining like hell outside. So I was watching that, and I had my uh, ham radio with me, my walkie-talkie, and I could talk to the main hospital on with my ham radio, and I could also monitor the Lee Summit police and fire or whatever. So anyway, a guy came in. His wife was a switchboard operator, and he came to pick her up. And they had a little girl, real little, had braces and I don't know what all. She had, oh God, I forgot. Real beautiful little girl, and she had spina bifida. That was it. Well, the husband, came in, and I guess they probably had a grandma, you know, or his mother-in-law or somebody probably had taken care of the little kid at home. But he brought her in sometimes when he was picking up his wife. But anyway, he says, and I had just looked out, side, and the rain was coming down like crazy. I'd never seen it coming down like that. And he came in, he says, have you seen it? And I said, yeah, the rain is really coming down. And he said, it's going sideways. And I said, what? He said, going sideways. So we walked over and looked out, and the rain was going sideways. I had never heard of wind shear. So anyway, right away is when I saw the rain going sideways like that. I heard on the radio, Lee Summit Fire came on. They didn't say very much. The only thing was, it was like, we've got debris on the roads now. And so I headed over to the lady's husband came with me, headed over to the switchboard, and I said, you need to call the house supervisor, tell her we need to go into code gray, right now. And she said, okay. So she got and then the switchboard operator says, she says, call the Lee Summit Police Department and ask what we should do. And I said, of course she could hear me, I couldn't hear her, but with the switchboard operator there with her, I said, no, tell her we need to go into code gray, and we need to go into code gray right now. And then, of course, she gave her permission, and so then they beep, 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 code gray, code gray, code gray, beep, beep, beep. And then I was like the only security officer there. And there was a bunch of stuff I knew I needed to do. I felt kind of bad, but the switchboard operator's husband, was there, and he said, I forget what he asked me. He said, where did it, hit? I didn't know any of that, He said, did they say tornado or, whatever? And I said, I've got some stuff I need to do. Well, the next day when he came to pick up his wife and everything, well, I talked to her, and she told what they lived right in where the tornado hit. But the Weather Bureau, when they investigated, they said, no, it was not a tornado, it was a wind shear. I'd never, that's the first time I'd heard of wind shear. Um, um, also, as soon as I told the house supervisor we need to go to code gray, I called the main hospital, research medical center. And she was fairly new, but we had a female who when she was patrolling, she worked nights, midnights, when I worked midnights down there with her when she got hired in. And she was worthless because she had a boyfriend who was married, who was a Kansas City, Missouri police officer. And he would show up, I guess, when he worked and park out in the parking lot. And out in the parking, we had a bunch of parking lots, but she was supposed to be out when she was patrolling. She was supposed to be out there, whatever, and she'd be sitting there the entire time, the 2 hours, and she'd be sitting in one place talking to her boyfriend and I don't know what else doing. And then when it was time for her to go home, well, she wouldn't show up, because she'd be there as long as she could with him, and then she'd drive to, the dispatch center or in the emergency room area, and she'd get the car there like late. We wouldn't be able to pass on really information to her because, then she wanted to leave, and it was just, So anyway, this wind shear hit at Lee Summit Hospital, and so I called the main hospital, dispatch, security dispatch, and she answered the phone, and I thought, okay, this is not going to be good, but I said, okay, we've apparently had a tornado hit out here at Lee Summit Hospital. We don't have any injuries yet. I forget, I told her a couple other items, and I said, now what you need to do is call the, security supervisor, the officer who was in charge of that shift, I said, you need to tell him what I just told you and make sure that he tells the house supervisor, the nurse that was in charge of the whole place at that time of night. And I said, be sure. So an hour or two, I think it was about 2 hours later, and I even explained, I said, because the house supervisor, when I was talking to, the house supervisor is probably going to be getting calls. Should we come in for, for the emergency? Should we blah, 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 And she said, okay. And I hung up, and I'm sure, well, I know she did not tell anybody. The female security officer who was standing that post for a couple hours. And because about 2 hours later, we had a female security officer who was excellent. And I heard her on the radio, she called dispatch, and she said, I just heard on, I forget the radio station, but it was a country and western station, She had it on in the car. They said, they just broke in and they said that, what did she say? That a tornado had hit Lee Summit and there were fires all over Lee Summit. And so then I heard like the next day or whatever. Of course, the house supervisor didn't know anything. The house supervisor complained that she didn't know anything, and she had doctors, nurses, all kinds of people, department heads, plant operations department head, and food service department head, and all these people calling in saying, should I come in? And nurses calling in and doctors calling in. You need us to come in, and and if they'd have just made the thing work the way it should have, but it didn't. Many years later, by the way, that security officer that I complained about, the female that was in dispatch, she was like a mini supervisor or something. She shouldn't have been even working hospital security. But the people who lived in Lee Summit where the wind shear hit, they thought it was a tornado, probably because they never heard of a wind shear, and I hadn't heard of a wind shear. there was a lot of damage done, but it wasn't so much, to like the roofs or things like that, because the wind was going sideways. On a house you have the roof or whatever, and under the end of it or whatever, they have a place for air to get in there uh, and it's designed, it was designed to, not let the rain in, but the rain was coming in like a fire hose being turned in, and people had a lot of damage done to their house. And I forget what the details were that I think some insurance companies were saying, no, we pay for tornadoes or whatever, but we don't pay for wind shear. Um, so uh, I never actually have seen a tornado. I mean, I've seen YouTube videos or whatever. I've never, and keep in mind, I worked 30 years hospital security, and I saw ice storms that caused trouble and flooding, that caused trouble, and even broken pipes in the hospital that caused, different hospitals that caused some trouble. Uh, I never actually saw, and uh, I was a reserve police officer in a small town, Raymore, Missouri, for a bunch of years, and there was times that they would, tone out for the fire department. Uh, were under, severe, to their own units, their uh, volunteer firemen and stuff. Uh, but before they would even get, like I would know from my experience and from, I was monitoring the thing, so I'd go someplace and park where I could get a view of possibly where the tornado would be coming if it did come. But I remember one day, uh, one night. So, by the way, like for years, all we had for this for Raymore, Missouri, there was no full-time officers. And it was just us, 7 reserve officers. I patrolled I think it was Sunday night for years and years. And then finally we got, a dispatcher. Well, at first we got a dispatcher who was Cass County dispatcher for the sheriff's department. And we would use that frequency. The only problem is Cass County usually just had one sheriff's deputy out, partially because of there for a while they didn't have enough money to gas up their cars. So they only went out if they had to go out. But also, what would happen is, keep in mind, the reserve officers or whatever, you're out there by yourself, and when the sheriff's deputy would go back to the headquarters of, in Harrisonville, I think it was Harrisonville, I guess probably the dispatcher, at least on the radio, I guess the phone would ring if he or she was someplace else, but they would just forget about us, and it wasn't just us. It was a couple other small, peculiar, whatever, who didn't have somebody every night. They just had somebody occasionally. Uh, but we could call, and they were probably going to hear us, because the sheriff's deputy had come back and, well, okay, he's here. Let's go sit down and have a cup of coffee and gossip about local politics or something. But I would be, when I was out, I'd be, if it was a tornado, I'd get a spot, and I knew that eventually the volunteer firefighter, they would show up quickly, but I'd go and I'd pick a spot, and then when I saw them, coming, I'd just get out of their way, get out of their way. They could take care of it. And but this one night it was kind of funny in a way. Uh, I'm patrolling and the thing came up, severe weather alert or something. And then I heard the Cass County deputy sheriff called in and he said, I'm pulling over, getting out of the way. These volunteer firefighters are going to run me off the road. And then a little bit later, I heard not in the same area, but the highway patrol, Missouri Highway Patrol. I heard this officer say just about the very same thing. The volunteer firefighters are out. I'm moving out of their way, getting off the road. And I didn't call in. I would have been like number 3, probably maybe even more. There would have been all over because they were out. But in all that time and of everything, I never saw a tornado. Seen a bunch of other things happen, Now in my video, someplace you're going to find what happened when what was it? It was just on a few of my brain cells there. Now I can't remember what it was. Oh, yeah, what I wanted to say. Hospitals. Oh man, I mean, I've complained about it, and even in front of they occasionally every year or every other year or something like that, you'd have the director of security would say, the assistant administrator of the hospital, who was in charge of, hospital administrator, 2 assistant administrators. One would be like nursing, but they would be in charge of, radiology, lab, all that kind of stuff. The other director of security or the other director would be in charge of security, food service, housekeeping, all that type of stuff. But all these hospitals, their disaster plan, it was drawn up, oh man, drawn up, right? All of the things that they would do, like once a year, they would do a drill for a disaster, an internal disaster or an external, like floods, hurricanes, whatever, I guess no hurricanes in the Kansas City area, but they always did them. The drill would always be Monday through Friday during the daytime. No drills at night, on the evening shift. No drills on the midnight shift. And of course, I don't know how many times I had to, and other officers, we had our, things that the emergencies that were, one time got a bomb threat at the small hospital that I worked at. And the small hospital, Research Belton Hospital, they adopted the plan. Research Belton Hospital had like 40 beds and no security during the daytime or evenings, just on midnights. And just, you get the idea. So the nurses did it. The nurses at night had to answer the telephone. The switchboard operator would go home at like 11 o'clock at night, throw a switch, and all the calls would go, which there weren't a lot, it was a small hospital. But all those calls went to the nurses up there, and there weren't any extra nurses like sitting at the desk or whatever. All the nurses were taking care of patients. They might go to the desk and do some, charting or whatever, but there was, if the phone would ring though, they would come and answer it. So a call comes in, and the the nurse did excellent. She answered the phone. Somebody says, I planted a bomb there at the hospital, something to that effect. And then she says, uh, where's the bomb put? And he says, in the emergency room. And then she says, what time is the bomb supposed to go off? And then he said, uh, 10 minutes from now, or 5 minutes or something. Boom. She did excellent. I had I had a security director write her up a letter of commendation, because if she hadn't got that information, I would have had to search the entire hospital. I would have had to try to, get the fire. They would have to get the fire department to come in, and it would just. And by giving the time, the location of the time, everything she did a great job. Made it so easy for me. There was a police officer there in the emergency room, and he says, I'll call the fire department, have them come in. And I said, well, we're going to take care of it ourselves, you and I, because the bomb is supposed to go off in, 10 minutes or something. Otherwise, if there wasn't a time given, we'd have had to, it would have been a mess. Because I worked at other hospitals where somebody just called in the bomb and they were taking the place apart. But anyway, I said, we'll take care of it. And then we had a new director of, administrator of the hospital, a new guy. And so he was brand new. He lived a few blocks away from the hospital. I called him and I said, hey, just had a bomb threat come in. Luckily, they gave us the location of it, and they gave us the time that it's going to, supposed to go off. And I said, our disaster plan is set up for, and I had to do it real quick, I said, it's set up for you to be in the command center here at the hospital, and for other administrative people to be here, and for a security officer to respond to the scene, and a security officer to go to the emergency room, security officer to go to the front doors. I forget what, And I said, of course, that I'm the only one here. And I said, do you want me to handle it? He said, yes, Jim, I appreciate it if you'd handle it. So he didn't have to come in or, whatever. But sure glad that I'm not, I was, after 30 years hospital security, I was happy to. Actually, I worked a little bit longer because I left Kansas City, Missouri, and then I went to Miami, and there I went to a contract guard agency. At first, I wasn't going to work. I was going to retire. Well, I did retire, but I kept working. But well, I worked at another hospital down there, and that was a bad experience because they were a screwed up hospital, and they also, they didn't like security. They didn't think they needed security, and so that was painful. Because when I worked in the Kansas City area, and I worked at hospitals, but some of them were not in Kansas City. They were suburb, in the suburbs, things like that. But there we were actually in-house secure. I mean, we worked for the hospital directly. We weren't contract people. But these other hospitals, we were, the one in Florida, they were screwed up, and I've even heard of a couple of things that happened that made the national news. from that hospital, and that hospital was they made a movie, I think, out of it. That hospital, um, there was a car accident, and uh, two young girls, I mean teenagers or something like that, were uh, badly injured. One died at the hospital right away. I think came in. So the hospital told the parents of the girl who died, well, your daughter died, blah, 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 blah. And then they told the other parents, okay, your daughter is going into surgery and it's, whatever. One small problem. The hospital messed up. The girl they said died for these parents, that was not their daughter. So a week or two later, the one girl who had surgery and was, had bandages and stuff on her and everything, the parents that were there with her, that wasn't their daughter. Their daughter was dead. The girl who these people were told, that, your daughter's in surgery or whatever. It was all, and it took a couple of weeks before they straightened it out. Can you imagine? Those other people buried. They didn't bury their daughter. They buried the people, and then these people that were sitting there in the room with who they thought was their daughter. That was that hot. Then they did stuff like that. There I was around when Kansas City started. In fact, I just happened to end up when Kansas City started a helicopter, medical helicopter or whatever. They came around to the various uh, fire departments and things and landed their helicopter and showed the people the helicopter and all that kind. I just happened to be uh, on duty when there was a car crash, and I was first officer. Well, I showed up, and it was actually a half a mile or a quarter mile outside the city limits. I was dispatched out there on J Highway, and I came to our city limits, but I thought, well, no, there's a report of a car stalled in the middle of the road. So I left the city limits and went up over the hill and came down, and man, that's where it was. I have two brothers, and one was dead right there, and the other was severely injured, And the local fire department, they had just had their introduction to the helicopter, and when I called in to dispatch, I couldn't remember. I can't remember because I worked for, reserve officer, police department, uh, hospital security, blah blah blah, all those kind of stuff. And I knew too that we were a small town, and everybody monitored the scanners. Just about everybody seemed like had a scanner. This is before 9/11. I mean, before 911 centers where they had to be set up, properly and stuff. That finally happened there. We finally had two or three full-time officers, and we had dispatchers around the clock, and the dispatchers had to go through some tough training for 911, and there had to be a bunch of changes made. But anyway, I knew that there was, because we'd had this happen before there. somebody was killed in a car accident, and that went out on the, of course, the radio, and not everybody in town, but people called, and we only, this is 4-9, 911 systems. We only had a few phone lines, and because we didn't need any more than that, but they were jammed up with calls coming in, and uh, the dispatcher was trying to get hold of a minister and get hold of, do various, whatever they did. And the people whose, uh, or the people who, that they were calling in on the phone because they heard the sirens, wanting to know, that was one of the, with the small town, the people that they were trying to get hold of, those parents were calling in on the phone asking what's going on, But anyway, for that call I went on, I also forgot that I had, when I saw the car and there was a dead, brother and one that needed to get to the hospital, I couldn't remember the code because it was, for some police departments it was such and such, and for others it was such and such. And I couldn't remember which one. I wanted to say whatever it was, 1031J or 1031 something else. One of them meant, I think, a stolen car, which there'd be no reason to, but I didn't want to use, I didn't want to put out over the radio, but I put out over to the dispatcher, and she did a wonderful job. No, it was a male volunteer. And he did it. I just said, 1023, gonna, need to send everything you got. And so the volunteer fire department responded, and then they were like the first, I know they were the first one for the Northwest Cass, volunteer fire department. I think they were like one of the first in Kansas City to actually call the helicopter. And then the coroner showed up. Well, no, first I was thinking, oh my God, I've done a lot of accident reports, for security. And I don't think almost none for the police department, there. Can't remember one that I did for them, actually. But I was thinking, oh man, this, for this, you got to really got to make a good accident report on it. It could be a lot of, so, anyway, the volunteer fire department showed up. They're very professional. And, although I can tell you some stories of, but I was thinking, oh my God, I've got to write this report, and this has got to be a good report, This is not a car bumped into another car in our parking, hospital parking garage or something. And then I saw this guy in uniform coming, very sharp and everything like that. And then it hit me. Oh, wow, I'm not in Raymore. This is a highway patrol, and he looked like he was like 15 or 16, and he showed up, and then I was like, oh, I didn't say it, thank God, to myself. And then in a little bit, they asked me to go inform the family, because they couldn't get hold of them, go tell the family that they needed to go to St. Joseph Hospital. And so then I drove there, pulled up, knocked on the door, and they came to the door, and I said, there's been an accident, and your son is being taken to St. Joseph's Hospital, not the satellite facility, but to the hospital. And then the mother said, our boys are together. Well, what about the other boy? And I said, I don't know anything. I just that they said you to go to St. Joseph Hospital, not the one at 150, but the main hospital, that you go there and everything. So they did. And what's interesting is the boy who was injured, he was hurt pretty bad. He ended up I think he had, I'm not sure if he had to be in a wheelchair or just, I can't remember because it was an article about it in the paper because of, the situation that he ended up being hired as a dispatcher for the helicopter. Also in Florida, the one hospital that I worked at, because the hospitals that I worked at in Kansas City, we used a helicopter because our hospital, well, that hospital, they had a helicopter. Later on, another hospital had a helicopter. There was a little bit of a rivalry, which I thought was stupid between the two, over their helicopter thing. But okay. And so the small hospital I worked at for 10 years, which was connected with the hospital that had the first helicopter, and then later there was another hospital had one. Once a year we had to have training on what to do if the helicopter crashes or something like that happens. And like we had in the emergency room, not in the emergency room, but out of the emergency room garage or whatever, a giant fire extinguisher. We had training like how to shut down the blades, what you hit to shut down the blades so that the blades don't go chopping you or somebody else up as they're rotating and sending off, pieces of metal every place. So we had to have that training. For one of the things we had to have. So anyway, I'm in Florida. Well, the first thing, let me jump away from that a little bit. Some guy apparently shooting his mouth off, said he was going to kill himself or something. And so anyway, that hospital that I worked at, I told you about them and the two girls and what have you, plus there was other stuff. But anyway, they called me to come to the emergency room. Oh, and by the way, at that hospital, security, there was only one of us on duty, of course. We could go into the hospital, and go to the cafeteria and have lunch. Or we could go into the hospital and go to the plant operations office and get us a new activity sheet to fill out, or things like that. But they didn't want us in the hospital unless they called us. I mean, they didn't, and that was it. Anyway, they call me and they go to the emergency room. Okay, we have a Baker patient coming in, so you'll need to stand by. And I said, what's a Baker patient? What? You don't know what a Baker, patient is? I said, no. And they were like, oh, no. That's something in Florida they have if, Baker Act. If it was a mental patient and he, might try to commit suicide or something like that, then security had to stand by it. And two, it was a messed up system. If in Florida, now that might be something they used in another state or two. Some other state might say, oh, that's a good idea, having a Baker Act, and pass it, in the legislature. But So they were like, you don't know what it is? And, I didn't even bother to say because I was already learned, these people were, they didn't want us in the hospital. And they just, one time I was at that hospital, I was making my rounds and they had a medical building next to it. And I went over to the medical building and went in, and I think all the doctors had left and all the staff had left. I don't think there was anybody in there, but it was unlocked. And of course, I had the keys where I could lock it up. But I go in and there's a guy there. And I said, sir, can I help you? And he says, no. And I said, are you waiting for a doctor or something like that? Yes, I'm waiting for the doctor. Uh, he's going to cut my head off. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, he's going to cut my head off. And I said, I don't think that's going to happen here. That sounds like something they would do over at the emergency room. I'll take you over there. And he said, oh, okay. So I locked up and got him. And I took the radio. I forget what they called that thing. It was kind of good in a way and it was bad in a way. It was like a phone walkie-talkie tied together. But that hospital required like the director of plant operations and different directors who were at home not being paid, and they had to keep like one guy went to uh, another city for a baseball game and he had to take the walkie-talkie with him so he was available at all times. And I thought, these people are a bunch of clowns. I mean, no way would that be legal, by the way, unless they pay them 24 hours a day. But anyway, the okay, so I don't know how many. Oh, we had to be trained, in Kansas City on how to handle the helicopter situation. We had to be there. We had to, not the small hospital when I worked there, we had very few, but at the main hospital where I also worked, we had to keep people from going out there when the helicopter was landing. One guy came off the street, wanted to commit suicide and walk into the blades. Uh, I wasn't working that day, I don't think. And it didn't happen. They stopped him. But we had to make sure that nobody came out of the emergency room when the helicopter was landing there because it kicks up so much debris it could, put your eye out or whatever, other stuff. And then we had to help, sometimes loading a patient or unloading. Well, at the small hospital I worked at for 10 years, I was the only, in fact, the nurses in the emergency room usually have me call, the main hospital, say we need a helicopter out here to pick up a patient. And um, and I knew enough. I had been trained as an EMT, by the way, but I knew enough from working there all those years and listening to everything. I knew that I had to give, how many lines, did they have in the person? How much did the person weigh? Make sure they didn't weigh too much for and all that. I knew all that kind of stuff. One day I had a vacation day or something, and I was off, and this real nice nurse, an elderly nurse, Virginia, she was something else, but we were friends. Not at first because she didn't like police or security, and then she saw that I wasn't, somebody that was a problem, But anyway, I had a day off, and Virginia was working, and they had a patient come in that needed to go, and so she had to call. And they asked, how much does the patient weigh? Have you got any IVs started and whatever? And Virginia said, just get your asses down here. Get your asses down here. We got this patient to go or whatever. And of course, that was the 911. They had everything tape recorded. And they reported her, and she just about lost her job, for that. But oh, so anyway, I don't know how many helicopters landings and takeoffs, like at the main hospital. We we had to shut down the thing so for safety and stuff. Um, and uh, so well, a number of things are popping in my. Oh, so I'm at this hospital, the fucked up one in Orlando, I think it was. Actually, I don't think it was like a suburb of Orlando. Uh, so I'm there, and I see them. They had a helicopter pad at this place, quite far away, And then I saw some signs they're building something over there. And then I come in another day. Okay, it looks like a helicopter landing pad. So I guess they're going to not use that one there and use this one up a little bit closer. And then I see them putting up some red lights on some poles or whatever. And so finally, and plant operations was like we didn't have a real security. So that's who we reported. Well, there was only one that was on duty at the time. That's who we talked to, or whatever. We could go to that office to fill out our activity sheet or get a new battery for our radio, but other than that, they didn't want us in there unless we were going to the bathroom or unless we were. So, uh, so anyway, the plant operation guy had the guy in charge of it standing out there with me. I said, "It looks like that looks like that's going to be a helicopter pad." Yeah, it's going to be a helicopter pad. And I said, and so the red lights you got going out, that's where the helicopter is going to, come in, right? He says, yeah, that's why we're going to put some signs up there because that's where employees park. We're putting signs up. Anybody parked here, we're not responsible for damage to their car, debris or whatever. And I said, so you're expecting them always to fly over? Oh yeah, they'll fly in the helicopter. Well, they'll know. They'll see the lights. And I said, you do realize that the helicopter lands certain places depending on which way the wind is blowing. Oh no, they know that. And I said, okay. And then also that place had the worst lost and found system, and they thought it was excellent. And the secretary that was in charge, well, the secretary for the maintenance guys, I just had somebody who couldn't find their billfold or whatever. Anyway, so I went to they came in as a patient, and so I went in and I told and I think she must have been a kindergarten teacher or something. And I said, your lost and found system here, it's not good. It's not set up the way it should be set up. Well, the Joint Commission on it was, but she said it like she was talking to a 5-year-old. Well, the Joint Commission, they do, and I said, yes, I know. They check all hospitals, every year or every couple of years. I know that. I've been on duty when they've come in many, many times. And I said, but your system doesn't. But the Joint Commission, I said, okay, never mind. I could tell you how their system works, but that's unnecessary. Just take my word for it. It sucked. And one thing they did was the plant operation, because usually the plant, security was there at night, but plant operations guys sort of took care of the stuff too. And if somebody had something that they figured was of no, shoes, slippers, or whatever, plant ops would just, that stuff would be there, and then they would, they would just destroy it. And I said, you do realize that sometimes people have sentimental value for something, you do understand that somebody may have money or jewelry or something, they may stick it in their shoe or something like that, and you're not checking it and you're just destroying it. Yeah, that's right. So, okay, I can hardly talk. My throat is hurting. My Coke has gotten hot. So I'm going to stop this. Thank you very much for watching.